This is why listening to an English podcast every single day could be the most important habit you ever build. And why most learners quit before it actually starts working? Between 1.5 and 1.75 billion people are actively learning English right now, according to the British Council's 2023 Future of English report. And here's what the data actually shows. Global English proficiency has dropped for 4 consecutive years. 60% of countries scored lower in 2024 than the year before, based on the EF English Proficiency Index. People are learning, they're just not learning in ways that stick. Today, we're breaking down a specific approach that research backs up, which is daily podcast learning for A2 level English learners. We'll cover what A2 actually means and what you can realistically expect at this level. We'll look at why daily practice outperforms everything else according to the science. We'll go through the exact vocabulary and phrases you need for talking about your daily routines. And we'll discuss how to build a listening habit that doesn't fall apart after 2 weeks. If you feel stuck in your English learning, or if you keep starting and stopping, or if you just want to know how to spend your time more effectively, this video is for you. Let's get into it. Before we talk methods, let's talk scale. The global English learning market sits at approximately $28.7 billion as of 2024, and projections put it near $70 billion by 2029, a 16.2% compound annual growth rate according to meticulous market research. China alone accounts for 400 million English learners, the largest single-country population in the world, with India, Brazil, and Indonesia following close behind. The median age of English learners globally lands at 26 years old, and 85% fall under 35. What's changed dramatically is how people learn. Digital English learning exploded by 200% between 2019 and 2021 during the pandemic, and mobile platforms now capture 80% of the language learning market share. Classrooms aren't where this happens anymore. People learn on their phones during commutes, while doing dishes, while exercising. Duolingo's numbers tell part of this story. 116.7 million monthly active users and over 40 million daily active users as of late 2024. With English ranking as the most studied language in 135 countries, up over 10% from the previous year. But here's the thing. Having access to resources doesn't mean people use them effectively. The 4-year decline in global English proficiency tells us something isn't working. People download apps, start courses, watch videos, and then they stop. The question isn't really how do I learn English, because infinite answers exist for that. The real question becomes, how do I keep learning English consistently in a way that actually produces results? And that brings us to podcasts, and specifically to the A2 level. Let's get specific about what A2 means, because understanding your level determines whether you choose the right content or waste your time. The Common European Framework of Reference, or CEFRE, sets the international standard for describing language ability, and A2 sits at what they call the elementary or way stage level. You're classified as a basic user, meaning you've moved past absolute beginner territory, but you're still building foundations. The Council of Europe's official definition states that A2 learners can understand sentences and frequently used expressions related to areas of most immediate relevance, things like personal information, shopping, local geography, and employment, with the ability to handle simple, routine exchanges. In practical terms, A2 means you have roughly 1,000 to 1,500 words of active vocabulary, about double what you had at A1. Ordering food works fine for you. Asking for directions poses no problem. Describing your daily activities in basic terms feels comfortable, and writing short messages like a text to a friend or a simple email comes naturally. But let's also be direct about what A2 cannot do because this matters for choosing content. Sustaining conversations independently remains out of reach at this level, and you need patient speaking partners who will slow down and repeat things. Following extended speech, like a podcast made for native speakers, overwhelms you quickly. Most English TV shows and movies stay incomprehensible without subtitles. Working in English outside very familiar limited contexts isn't realistic yet. Fast native speech and unfamiliar accents still create real challenges. None of this should discourage you. It should help you choose appropriate content. Trying to learn by watching American sitcoms at full speed when you're at A2 leads to frustration and confusion. Not because you're bad at English, but because the content doesn't match your level. Grammar structures at A2 include present simple and continuous, past simple and continuous, basic future forms with will and going to, modals like can, have to, and should, comparatives and superlatives, and simple conditional sentences. Reaching A2 from beginner level requires approximately 180 to 200 hours of guided learning according to Cambridge English and EF Education, which translates to roughly 6 or 7 months if you're studying 1 hour per day. But here's where method matters because not all study hours produce equal results. And that brings us to the science of daily practice. This is where the research gets compelling. A 2024 study published in Studies in Second Language Acquisition through Cambridge Core confirmed what language teachers have long suspected. Knowledge retention improves dramatically when practice takes place in a distributed rather than massed fashion. Let me put that in plain terms. Distributed practice means spreading your learning across many days with a little bit every day. Massed practice means cramming, doing a lot all at once and then nothing for a while. Distributed practice wins, and it's not even close. A major meta-analysis from Cepeda and colleagues published in Psychological Bulletin in 2006 looked across numerous studies and found the same pattern. What does distributed actually look like in practice? The research consensus points to 15 to 30 minutes daily as effective for beginners, with 30 to 60 minutes being optimal if you're serious about making progress. Multiple sources, including Babbel magazine, cite what's called the half-hour theory, the idea that 30 minutes daily hits the sweet spot for learning something new. Here's a key finding. Consistency matters more than duration. A study from Michigan State University in 2019 examined students using Babbel, and among those who studied at least 15 hours total, spread over 12 weeks, 75% improved their oral proficiency by at least one sublevel. That's 15 hours over 12 weeks, less than 2 hours a week, but spread out consistently over time. Duolingo's 2024 efficacy research found similar results, showing that after approximately 27 hours of study spread over 3 months, learners improved significantly across all measures of receptive and productive ability. Now let's talk about habit formation because this is where most people fall apart. A famous study from University College London by Lally and colleagues in 2010 tracked 96 people over 12 weeks as they tried to form new habits. Habit automaticity, the point where something becomes automatic and you don't have to force yourself to do it, plateaued at an average of 66 days. The range varied from 18 days to 254 days, depending on the complexity of the behavior, which means some habits form quickly for some people while others take much longer. The encouraging finding from that study was that missing one day does not seriously impair habit formation. Automaticity gains resumed after a single missed session, which means Missing a day doesn't ruin everything, and you just pick up where you left off. Daily practice specifically matters because of something called the forgetting curve. Hermann Ebbinghaus, a German psychologist, did foundational research on memory in the late 1800s and discovered that without reinforcement, we forget information rapidly. About 90% of new information disappears within 7 days without review. And the steepest part of that forgetting curve happens within the first 24 hours. A 2019 study published in PNAS using Duolingo's data confirmed that learners following optimized spaced repetition schedules, where you review material at strategic intervals, memorize more effectively than those using other approaches. Daily exposure directly combats the steepest part of the forgetting curve. And when you listen to English every day, you're constantly reinforcing before that 24-hour drop-off happens. The science tells us this: short daily sessions beat long, irregular sessions. Consistency matters more than duration. Forming a real habit takes about 66 days. Missing a day doesn't ruin everything, and daily exposure fights the natural tendency to forget. Now, let's get practical. If you're at A2 and learning about daily routines, what vocabulary do you actually need to know? Based on the Cambridge English I2 Key Vocabulary List and British Council resources, 10 verbs stand out as absolutely necessary for talking about daily routines. First comes get up or wake up, as in I get up at 7 o'clock, because this is how every daily routine conversation starts. Second is have, specifically have breakfast, have lunch, have dinner. Like I have breakfast at 8. Note that English speakers say have breakfast rather than eat breakfast, though both work fine and have sounds more natural in this context. Third is go, covering go to school, go to work, go home, as in I go to work by bus. And the preposition changes with go to for destinations, but go home without the to. Fourth comes come, as in come back or come home, like I come home at 5, which describes returning to a place. Fifth includes eat and drink, such as I eat lunch at noon or I drink coffee in the morning. Sixth is do, especially do homework, as in I do homework after school. Seventh is watch, particularly watch TV, like I watch TV in the evening. Eighth is take, covering take a shower, take a bath, take a break, as in I take a shower every morning. Ninth is go to bed, like I go to bed at 10. And note that this differs from sleep, because go to bed describes the action of getting into bed. 10th is sleep, as in I sleep for 8 hours. Using these verbs effectively requires frequency adverbs, the words that tell us how often something happens. Always means 100% of the time. Like I always have coffee in the morning. Usually means most of the time, maybe 80 to 90%, as in I usually wake up at 7. Often indicates frequently, maybe 60 to 70%, like I often watch TV after dinner. Sometimes means occasionally around 30 to 50%, as in I sometimes go to the gym. Rarely indicates not very often, maybe 10 to 20%, like I rarely eat breakfast. Never means 0%, as in I never drink alcohol. Time expressions round out the toolkit. Every day, twice a week, 3 times a month, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, at night. Telling time comfortably matters too. At 7 o'clock, at 8:30, at 8:45. Let's put this together in a simple daily routine description, the kind of thing an A2 learner should be able to produce. I usually wake up at 7 o'clock. I take a shower and have breakfast at 7:30. I always have coffee and toast. I go to work at 8. I usually come home at 6 in the evening. Sometimes I go to the gym after work. I have dinner at 7 and watch TV for 1 or 2 hours. I always go to bed at 11. I usually sleep for 8 hours. That's A2 level English right there. Simple, clear, and built from high frequency vocabulary you can use immediately in real conversations. Common phrases for everyday situations help you navigate daily life in English. Excuse me, can you help me? Get someone's attention politely and asks for assistance. I'd like, please, works for ordering like, I'd like a coffee, please, or I'd like to make an appointment, please. How much is this? Handles shopping situations. Could you speak more slowly? Proves essential for A2 learners because native speakers often don't realize how fast they're talking. I usually lets you discuss your habits and routines. What time does open/close? Covers questions like what time does the bank open? And where is the handles questions like where is the bathroom? Or where is the train station? These phrases come up every day. They're simple to learn, they're practical to use, and they're exactly what A2 learners need. We've covered the importance of daily practice and the vocabulary you need. Now let's examine why podcasts work so well as a format for language learning. A 2013 systematic review published in English Language Teaching examined 20 studies on podcast use in language education and concluded that podcasts greatly support learning, not just in speaking and listening, but also in other language skills in areas such as grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary. The market reflects this effectiveness. Language learning podcasts represent a $1.1 billion market in 2025, projected to reach $6.5 billion by 2033, a 25% compound annual growth rate according to future data stats. People are voting with their time and money, and podcasts keep winning. The reasons come down to practical advantages. Flexibility ranks first, with 86% of podcast listening happening on mobile devices, according to industry data. Nearly half of listeners, 49%, listen while doing household chores. Another 42% listen during commutes, and 29% listen while exercising. Podcasts turn dead time into learning time. Learning intent matters too. Spotify research shows 60% of podcast listeners specifically use podcasts to learn something, which means this isn't passive background noise for most people, but intentional education. Listening skill development proves especially valuable for language learners because listening often ranks as the hardest skill to develop. You can't control how fast native speakers talk and you can't ask them to repeat, but podcasts give you that control through pause, rewind, and replay. A 2020 meta-analysis published in PMC and NIH synthesized 80 experimental studies on mobile-assisted language learning and found a medium to strong effect, favoring mobile learning over traditional methods. A 2024 meta-analysis in Language Learning and Technology covering 18 experimental studies found significantly large effect sizes for mobile-assisted speaking skill development. But here's the catch from the research. Active listening outperforms passive listening significantly. The difference breaks down like this. Passive listening means having English playing in the background while you do something else, maybe cooking, cleaning, or scrolling through your phone without really focusing. Active listening means paying attention, trying to understand, noticing new words, pausing to look something up, and repeating phrases out loud. Research confirms that passive background listening provides some benefit by helping with sound pattern recognition and getting your ear used to the rhythm and sounds of English, but it cannot replace the elements that make learning effective. The recommendation from researchers suggests 30 or more minutes of passive listening can add value, but only as a supplement to active study, not a replacement for it. When you listen to an English learning podcast, let it play in the background sometimes, but also carve out times for active engagement where you follow along. Pause when you don't understand, repeat phrases, and really work with the material. Now let's examine what actually works in terms of content format and style for A2 learners. Looking at successful English learning content, channels like English with Lucy with over 11 million subscribers, Lingua Marina with over 8.5 million, and BBC Learning English with over 7 million, clear patterns emerge. For a two-level learner specifically, research points to several factors that matter. Length comes first. Podcast episodes should run around 6 to 10 minutes, while YouTube videos work best at 6 to 12 minutes. Studies show retention drops under 70% for videos exceeding 6 minutes, which means shorter, focused content achieves better completion rates. Speech rate matters significantly. Native English speakers typically talk at around 180 words per minute, but content for A2 learners should slow down to 120 to 140 words per minute, giving learners time to process what they're hearing. Vocabulary load needs limits too, with new vocabulary capped at 5 to 8 words per episode maximum. TPRS methodology, which stands for Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling, recommends 6 to 12 new vocabulary items per lesson, but with extensive repetition through varied contexts. Storytelling proves more effective than pure grammar instruction for beginners, which might seem counterintuitive. If you want to learn grammar, shouldn't you study grammar rules directly? The TPRS approach shows that students can reach intermediate mid-level in 60 to 100 hours using story-based methods compared to 400 to 600 hours with traditional grammar-focused approaches. Stories create shared context. They enable natural repetition without boredom. They lower anxiety because you're not being tested, you're just following a story. And they help with vocabulary retention because words attach to memorable scenarios. The recommended format mix for A2 learners breaks down to approximately 60% storytelling and narrative content, 25% conversation and dialogue practice, and 15% direct vocabulary and grammar instruction. Using the learner's native language strategically also helps. Research from the New York State Education Department confirms the learner's first language functions as a resource, not a problem. For A2 learners, the optimal balance runs about 70 to 80% English with 20 to 30% support in the learner's native language, which proves especially true for podcast content where you can't see the speaker's face or read visual context clues. Let's bring everything together with a practical approach to building a daily listening habit. Remember that 66-day figure from the UCL habit research, because that's your target timeline. A little over 2 months of consistent daily practice before this becomes automatic. Here's what the research tells us. Start small because 15 to 30 minutes proves sufficient for beginners. Committing to an hour a day isn't necessary, but committing to every day matters. Same time, each day accelerates habit formation. Habits form faster when attached to existing routines. So find a time slot that works. Maybe during your morning commute, during breakfast, or during your lunch break, and protect it. Missing one day that won't destroy your progress. The Lally study showed that missing a single day didn't significantly impact habit formation, which means if you miss a day, don't give up and don't tell yourself you failed. Just continue the next day. Tracking your progress helps, not to punish yourself, but to see how far you've come. After 66 days, look back and you'll be surprised at the difference. Mixing active and passive listening makes sense too, with some listening time focused on active engagement and some running as background listening while you handle chores. Choosing content at your level proves essential. If you're at A2, listening to native speed podcasts made for native speakers leads to frustration and ineffective learning. Find content designed for your level where you understand maybe 70 to 80% and the rest feels slightly challenging but learnable. That 90% forgetting figure from Ebbinghaus explains why daily practice matters so much. Every day you practice, you're fighting that forgetting curve. Every day you skip, you're letting information slip away. The good news is that the curve gets less steep over time. And the more you practice, the more you retain, which makes retention easier as you go. Let's bring this back to where we started. Between 1.5 and 1.75 billion people are learning English right now. The market represents nearly $30 billion and grows at 16% per year. People have more access to English learning resources than ever before. And yet global English proficiency has dropped for 4 years straight. Access isn't the problem. Consistency is the problem. Method is the problem. Choosing content that's too hard and giving up is the problem. Cramming once a week instead of practicing a little every day is the problem. Research tells us exactly what works. Distributed practice beats massed practice. 15 to 30 minutes daily proves enough for beginners. Forming a real habit takes about 66 days. Missing a day doesn't ruin everything because you just continue the next day, and daily exposure fights the forgetting curve at its steepest point. For A2 learners specifically, the path forward looks clear. Focus on high-frequency vocabulary, the verbs and phrases you actually use every day. Choose content at your level, slow enough to understand, but challenging enough to learn from. Mix storytelling with direct instruction. Engage actively when you can. Listen passively when that's all you can manage. Podcasts work because they fit into your life. Commute time, cooking time, and exercise time all convert into learning time. You gain control through pause, rewind, and replay. And the language learning podcast market grows at 25% per year because people discover this approach delivers results. If you're an A2 learner feeling stuck, the solution isn't a new app, a new course, or a new method. The solution looks simpler than that. Find content at your level. Listen every day. Stick with it for at least 66 days before judging whether it works. Daily routines vocabulary might seem basic at first glance. Phrases like, I get up at 7 o'clock and I usually have coffee in the morning might seem too simple to matter. But that's exactly the point. This is the English you actually use. This is the English that makes you functional in daily life. Master this and you have a foundation. Build the habit and you can build on that foundation indefinitely. The difference between learners who improve and learners who stay stuck isn't talent, and it isn't time. It's consistency. 15 minutes a day over 66 days. That's the formula. Thanks for watching.